First of all, just explain to us, what is the thinking, do you think, behind Germany's lack of decision making on this?
Well, Chloe, since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, the Germans have had a habit of going slow on all of these big decisions on equipment transfers. So it's nothing new. They are cautious, particularly the Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and they have worried that the introduction of sort of new equipment might sort of provoke Russia further, escalate the fighting. Their public opinion also, unlike, for example, in the UK or many other NATO countries, is quite divided on the merits of sending military equipment to Ukraine. So this has made Berlin somewhat cautious. But we've seen this already, whether it was Iris-T air defense systems, the Marder infantry fighting vehicle, the Leopard tracked artillery, which Ukraine requested in the past. The Germans get there in the end. And I've no doubt, particularly given the support among other coalition partners of Chancellor Scholz to send Leopards to Ukraine, and given the pressures that we saw yesterday at Ramstein on Germany, that the Germans in traditional style will take their time and get there in the end. It didn't help, of course, Chloe, that just before, literally on the eve of this big meeting in Ramstein yesterday, the Germans changed their defense minister, bringing in somebody, Boris Pistorius, who has no background in defense. So obviously this must have complicated coalition decision making, but I'm sure the Germans will get over the line soon.
What difference would these tanks make on the ground? We know that they are specifically designed to compete with the tanks that Russia is using in Ukraine. Could it be a game changer if Ukraine had the numbers that they're asking for?
Yes, because clearly the Ukrainians are losing large numbers of soldiers at the moment in the fighting around Solidar and Bakhmut. So some people think it's even in sort of treble figures a day. So they can't obviously sustain that kind of hemorrhage, although the Russians are losing far more. So they do need more protection from their vehicles, like tanks, but not just tanks, but also infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, and many of those, by the way, were pledged to Ukraine yesterday. So that's the positive side. The other thing, of course, is that they can use those tanks to overcome the much stronger fortifications, all of that First World War style barbed wire and trenches that the Russians are now constructing on the territory that they control. And thirdly, we're all anticipating that the Russians will try to go on the offensive again in the spring. Putin has made it clear that he's not giving up, he's not doubling down, he wants to capture more territory. And those tanks will really help to block a Russian offensive. But Chloe, it's very important not just to fixate on just one single sort of, game changer platform. Warfare is all about sort of integrating all of your pieces of equipment, air, ground, whether it be fighting vehicles, artillery, anti-tank weapons, tanks, into a combined arms operation. Everything has to support everything else. And so it's just as important to pay attention to that aspect of the battle at the moment.
What do you make of these comments by Ukraine's defence minister this morning that Ukrainian forces are going to start training on the Leopard 2 tanks in Poland? Because we know that Poland and Finland want to give these tanks. Germany is stopping them at the moment. I mean, what's the significance of that training? And do you think actually Poland and Finland will go, well, whether you like it or not, Germany, we're giving the tanks?
Well, Poland has made noises, Chloe, that
Yeah.
yes, they will supply those tanks given the urgency, although of course everybody would prefer to respect the rules when it comes to getting licenses, often linked with military equipment, to be able to re-export it to another country. And the Germans have made some noises that, even while they deliberate in Berlin about sending their own German Leopards to Ukraine, that they will lift those licensing restrictions. And it's not just Finland and Poland who have these Leopard 2s. 20 countries, 19 European and Canada have these tanks. So potentially the reserve pool that Ukraine can draw on to get up to that 300 figure is potentially very large. And so, yes, I mean, it obviously makes sense to anticipate that the Leopards will go sooner rather than later, and to, of course, start that essential training for the Ukrainian tank crews.
We spoke to Mark Malloch-Brown, the former Deputy Secretary-General to the UN, yesterday on this programme, and he was saying what's crucial for Ukraine now is to be given offensive weapons, not just defensive weapons. That's what's going to turn this around. Do you think that is one of the concerns playing in Germany's mind, that it will see this as maybe further provoking Russia? I mean, there were some comments yesterday, weren't there, from opposition figures in Germany that Chancellor Scholz is hoping to restore a special relationship with Russia.
Well, first of all, on the weapons, it's very difficult to sort of distinguish between offensive weapons and defensive weapons because you can use most weapons in both modes according to the kind of conflict that you are fighting. I mean, the United States and other NATO allies have been crystal clear with the Ukrainians that these weapons are only to be used inside Ukraine, although that, of course, covers the territory of Ukraine occupied by Russian forces. And for example, HIMARS, these long-range artillery systems that the US has given Kiev are not to be fired inside Russia. And the Ukrainians, I think, fully understand that as they are totally dependent upon this Western military support, they're not going to sort of violate that restriction and risk losing all of that American help, which, by the way, yesterday in Ramstein totaled 2.5 billion. So, you can use anti-tank weapons both ways. Even the Russians are using defensive weapons, S-300 air defense, to attack Ukrainian citizens. So they're playing that game big time. But coming on to talk to Russia, I don't think so at the moment. I mean, of course, President Macron, Chancellor Scholz, many other allied governments tried to reach out to Putin at the early stages of the conflict, but Putin has made it absolutely clear that he's not listening, even if he picks up the phone. He's doubling down on the conflict. He wants a military victory. Yes, sooner or later, the West will have to talk to Russia again. Obviously, sooner or later, there will be a negotiation. But given Putin's behavior, particularly attacking Ukrainian cities and the energy infrastructure over the Christmas New Year period, I don't think there's any political room at the moment to start any kind of dialogue with Russia until Russia backs down from Ukraine.